Hello everyone, welcome to the CEC lecture series. I'm Nupur Chawla, teaching English literature at Maitri College, Delhi University. And today I'm here to discuss with you about a very important topic that's called literature and ideology. Now, as all of us have been students of literature and we've been engaging with texts, reading novels, plays, a lot of times poetry. So while we are into the thick of things, there are some basic concepts that and certain basic questions which do come to our mind, but then we may not pay as much attention to them. So in today's lecture, we are going to cover those aspects, the very fundamentals of what literature is, and in particular, what literature means in conjunction with this concept called, which is defined by the term ideology, right? So how do these two concepts interact? One informs the other. All of that is going to be under discussion today. Literature, when we look at it as a discipline, we see that it comprises, in fact, be it a reader who's trained in literature, or be it just a casual reader of a piece of fiction. The person actually undergoes a kind of a journey. It's like the person enters into a different world altogether. And over here, I will want to bring to you a very telling pictorial description of this aspect. So as you can see here on the screen, there's this book, which of course then, as you can see, there's a book, there's this little girl carrying an umbrella, and she's walking inside the book. Or, so to say, we can say that she is walking on the pages. So it's a very, very symbolic description in that sense. This seems to have come very close to what a book does to the reader. That how it takes a reader into a different world altogether, a world which is created by the writer and which is somewhat removed from the material reality that the reader is part of. So of course this was just a beginning thought that I wanted to share with you in order to establish that how literature is then in that sense a very different realm that we engage with, not just as a discipline but even in terms of our day-to-day reading of the text as well. So we begin first then with a few reflections on the term literature, right? So the first thing that we say is that literature is comprises the imaginative and fictional writings that are specially distinguished in form, expression and emotional power. Now this is a very important idea with some terms that I would like all of you to pay attention to. The first thing is that these are imaginative and fictional writings. So as we all are aware that writings can be encountered in various spheres of life. For instance, even if you buy something, right? So for example, if you're buying a new product or an electronic item, even that comes with this little booklet, which often is referred to as literature. But then how do we distinguish that with the literature that you and I study in the university and colleges? So basically then what we are going to talk about is this very particular aspect of literature that comprises the imaginative and fictional writings, right? And which then are also distinguished in the form of expression and emotional power. So imagination then is a very, very important part of literature, and we see that these writings then have genesis in dreaming. So the person that is writing a piece of literature, be it fiction, be it any other form, the person is essentially using his or her own imaginative power to reflect on something, and in particular to create a world which is perhaps different from the immediate material reality, right? And we also see that while creating this fictional world or this imaginative world, the person also ends up expressing some kind of a desire, right? So these texts then, or works of literature then, can also be seen as an expression of a desire, right? A way to reflect upon reality, yeah, and also through that reflection to be able to identify the gaps and potentialities in that reality. Now, this is a very important point that we make over here. As the writer creates a new world through the means of words, by deploying a few characters, by thinking of a story, we all understand that, and of course, a story is in the case of fiction, but when we talk about play or when we talk about poetry, of course, the way of expression is different. But one thing which is common across all these literary forms or genres, that is drama, poetry and fiction, one thing that is common is that the creator of these works then is expressing some kind of a desire through those words, and he does that by with the help of his imaginative faculty. Now we might wonder that what desire is it, right? So a lot of times, as as sensitive human beings, as sensitive observers of reality around us, we feel that there are certain things which are not right, or there are certain things that we would want to transpire differently, right? So all these observations then, they of course are a part of our sensibility. So these these aspects which we want to see in our reality, but then a lot of times they are not present, then literature gives them the space, literature gives the creator that space to express that desire of all of that which is absent in the present situation, right? And therefore we say that these works then, works of literature then become a way of reflecting upon reality, right? So reality then seems to stand examined when a person creates a work of literature using the fictional means, right? And in the process then these two things stand highlighted, that is the gaps as well as the potentialities in the moment of depiction. Now what do we mean by that? Gaps again relates to what I just now told you, that how there are certain aberrations, there are certain those aspects of reality which we as human beings do not do not really appreciate. For instance, certain kind of prejudices, certain kind of maybe exploitative tendencies that we might witness in and around our ourself. So these gaps then, which are somewhat disconcerting, and a lot of times a person is not able to speak out loud, a person is not able to question these silences, these gaps in the material reality. So that's when literature comes to, so to say, if we can call it, rescue, right? And at the same time, the second thing that I said was that even the potentialities of a particular circumstance get expressed. So a lot of now society, of course, is this very active and alive mix of things which are on track, things which are off track, things which are still in the making, a lot of factors, a lot of parameters which are yet to be realized. Yeah, so a writer then, or a creator of a work of fiction, is able to engage with these aspects of society or of social living, which we otherwise are not able to do in our day-to-day life. So that's why we say that works of literature then are very important kind of artifacts that reflect upon reality. The second thing that we say about literature and these texts is that it is an enabling space, right? So it's a space of freedom. Why do we call it an enabling space? Because in literature, through the written word, in this imaginative realm, the creator, the individual, is able to imagine and express all that they wish for, right? So therefore, as compared to the lived reality, we can say that this space then comes to define some sense of freedom. Freedom, why? Because there might be certain things that one cannot express openly, as I was just now telling you, but instead they find expression in these literary works. The next thing that we say is that in fact, the third thing that we must keep in mind while thinking about the term literature is that how it also provides an objective distance from material reality. The first thing that we said was that how it reflects upon reality, right? The second thing we said was that how it's a space of freedom. The third thing that we say is that these works of literature then also provide an objective distance from material reality. Now, what do we mean by objective distance? It basically means that, when we read a book, we enter into a different world and we start to be driven as a reader. We are then driven by the logic of the world which is created by the author. Right? So when we are engaging with the characters there, when we are engaging with the situations there, when we are also engaging with the context that is, kind of depicted in that piece of writing, in that case then, we are able to reflect on certain aspects of reality from a distance. So literature then, or these imaginative works, provide us that objective distance from where we can view the material reality. Yeah, so the reality that you and I, we live day in and day out. So by means of these fictional works, we are able to take a step back, and instead of being a person directly experiencing this reality, we become an observer of this reality as it gets reflected in the given fictional piece, right? So that's what defines the second important, kind of, we can say, feature or characteristic of any piece of writing that we call as literature, right? Now, coming to the next very important idea, when we having reflected on the term, the next thing that comes to our mind, and in fact, this is a question which as students of literature you would have or you might have come across even before, but it's something that we that just does not leave us, right? So what is this question? The question is that whether literature comprises ideas, right? Literature as ideas and or entertainment. So this title itself, when I say that literature, ideas and or entertainment, itself seems to present the conundrum in front of us, right? That do we approach literature as this space carrying a certain set of ideas, or do we approach these writings as a source of pleasure, right? Because of course there are imaginative elements involved which take us away into a different realm. So there are these different artistic devices which are deployed by the creator, so which of course also provide a sense of pleasure, a sense of fulfillment as we engage emotionally, as we also engage at a lot of different levels. So then the question that is ahead of us is, can we see literature as idea, or do we see literature as entertainment, or do we see literature as combining both these tendencies, right? Of course, we all like to adopt this idea of a more complex understanding of the discipline instead of going into either or, right? But for our purpose, we are going to look at literature from both these perspectives, right? So literature as a realm of ideas and as a realm of which provides some kind of an entertainment. All right. So the other thing, so then we can say that an imaginative fictional piece of writing is that space which is which carries a certain set of ideas. Yeah. Now then this dichotomy, or this so to say binary that we've been talking of, also then can be expressed in another terms, that should our approach to literature be aesthetic, or is literature an aesthetic category, or is it a space where politics plays out, right? So aesthetic versus political, entertainment versus ideas. This is something which seems to define the crux of the question that we are going to talk about over here. So talking about the aesthetic part, so when we look at pieces of fiction, when we look at works of literature from an aesthetic perspective, there is this particular theory that seems to kind of define this aspect, which is called formalism, right? So now formalism is that theory which originated in Russia in the early 20th century, and it then defined the aesthetic way of approaching literature, or it to put it still more specifically, formalism, or this a school of thought, actually focused on patterns and technical devices of literature to the exclusion of subject matter and social values. So according to this theory, if one did a formalist reading of a particular text, then in that reading the focus of the person would be on the technical devices, would be on the artistic tools used by the creator, by the author or the poet or the playwright, to create this work of literature, right? So what kind of tools are used, how are they functioning, what kind of imagery is there, what is the nature of the plot, how are the characters patterned. So when you go into all these technical aspects, or so to say these aesthetic aspects, then we see this is one way of approaching literature, and this formalist school of thought then would stop at that, right? They would not talk about the subject matter or the social values that one might also find in the piece of writing, right? The other engagement of this school of thought is that they would look at this binary of literary language versus the ordinary speech. Yeah, so this so all these writings which deploy imagination, what kind of language do they use? So that language, the language which is deployed in these works of fiction, or these works of literature, then is referred to as literary language, which would have some kind of a technicality to it, and then this is opposed to the ordinary speech that people use in day-to-day life. So this becomes another point of engagement for the formalists then, who discuss literature from an aesthetic point of view. So if you might be wondering, so who are these people or theorists associated with formalism? We have Boris Eichenbaum, Victor Shklovsky, and Roman Jakobson. So these three are these famous theorists who have talked about these ideas with respect to imaginative writings. Now around the 1930s, this theoretical school then also was associated with the Prague linguistic circle as well. All right. Now to further understand what the approach or what the idea of the formalist school was towards understanding literature, we will look at two very important references, one by Roman Jakobson and the other by Victor Shklovsky. So now Jakobson says, and I quote, "The object of study in literary science is not literature but literariness." Now look at this quote. It says that the object of study is not literature. right? It is not that work, but instead it is the literariness. So the operative term over here is the word literariness. Now, what do we mean by literariness? It means that all those elements which go into the construction of this piece of literature, right? So then the focus there would be on these constructedness. I mean the constructedness of work, and then one would go into these parameters of plot, of imagery, of symbolism, of characters, of dialogue in the case of drama. So all these formal elements then comprise the literariness of a work, and according to Jacobson, that is what is the objective study, right? On the other hand, we have Victor Shklovsky, who also belongs to the same school, and he seems to be presenting yet another aspect of this kind of an aesthetic approach to literature. He says, and I quote, that the primary aim of literature is to defamiliarize. Now that's the word that he uses, defamiliarize. It makes strange the everyday world and renews the reader's capacity for sensation. Now again, two very important words here, defamiliarize and sensation. So according to Shklovsky, the aim of the literature is not to engage you in its own world. Instead, it functions as a way to to bring about some kind of a disconnect between what you already know of the world around. Yeah, so that kind of a defamiliarizing potential then is, so to say, the aim of literature according to Shklovsky, and he says that with this what happens? It basically renews the reader's capacity for sensation. Now look at the word sensation. It means what? That by a means of this this kind of a disconnect which is brought about by literature, the reader is able to revive or is able to experience the same things slightly differently, and with the focus on sensations then yet again underlines the aesthetic engagement of a reader with the piece of writing. Yeah, so then this actually kind of sums up the first half of this question that we've talked about, that is where we look at literature as a piece of art, as a work of art, where we look at it as an aesthetic category, where we approach it from the point of view of the artistic elements that are part of it, instead of approaching it from the perspective of social reality or from the perspective of subject matter, right? Now coming to the second half of this debate, that is whereby literature then is a realm of ideas representing human experience from a particular standpoint, right? So over here what is important is that this approach to literature focuses on representation of human experience from a particular standpoint. So what is important is the aspect of standpoint, right? Now when I say from a particular standpoint, this actually starts to define these different theoretical approaches. Yeah, so first of all, if we understand what do we mean by standpoint. Standpoint means the place from where we examine a particular aspect of human experience, right? So that then becomes yet another approach to literature, whereby we are examining human experience from a particular angle, right? And to understand what these angles are, different schools of thought, that is these theoretical approaches, help us understand this. For example, if we do a feminist study, then of course we're going to look at the representation of gender. if you look at it from the point of view of the subaltern, then we are going to look at how the marginalized are represented in a particular a given work. Likewise, we have theoretical approaches of post-colonialism and Marxism. So all these then define a certain set of ideas which then inform our reading of literature. Yeah. So what we have seen so far are these two very important things. First, we looked at we actually reflected on the term literature, and we unpacked that term and the different dimensions associated with it. Next, we looked at this very central debate which always remains alive as to how do we approach literature? Literature as an aesthetic category, as that entity which gives us pleasure, which gives us entertainment, or literature as a realm of ideas, right? But again, I would like to conclude by saying that it's never an either or, but definitely we must be aware of these different questions as we engage with this discipline. Thank you.